sterile, antiseptic-scented confines of the hospital corridor, they were anything but. They were a seismic shock, a fault line cracking open directly beneath Sonny Corinthos's feet, threatening to swallow the very ground he stood on. For a moment, there was only silence. The distant, mechanical beep of a monitor from a nearby room faded into a dull hum. The low murmur of nurses at their station dissolved into meaningless noise. Sonny's world, a world built on a foundation of perceived control, unshakable loyalty, and a clear, if morally complicated, understanding of friend and foe, had just been rendered a lie. He stood frozen, his hand, which had moments before been gripping Turner's shoulder in a gesture of frantic, brotherly concern, now falling limply to his side. His eyes, dark and perpetually stormy, narrowed, searching the face of the man he knew as Dr. John Turner. He was looking for a flicker of a joke, a sign of the concussion talking, anything that would make this declaration a temporary insanity rather than a catastrophic truth. But Turner's gaze, though clouded with pain and the fog of medication, was steady. There was a terrifying clarity in them, a resignation that spoke of a secret too heavy to carry for one more second. "What?" Sonny's voice was a low, dangerous rasp, barely louder than a whisper, yet it seemed to echo in the hollow space between them. "What did you just say?" Turner, his body battered and broken from the accident, shifted slightly on the gurney, a wince of pain distorting his features. "Sonny. I couldn't, not after this. Not with you here." He took a shallow, ragged breath. "The name is Mason. Alexander Mason." The name landed not with a bang, but with a chilling, insidious silence. It slithered into Sonny's consciousness, unfamiliar yet instantly, profoundly threatening. Alexander Mason. It was a name devoid of the history he shared with John Turner. There were no shared memories attached to it, no late-night whiskey-soaked conversations about life and loss, no mutual understanding forged in the crucible of personal tragedy. This was a stranger's name. A ghost's name. Mason, Sonny repeated, the word foreign and ugly on his tongue. His mind, a formidable instrument honed by decades in the underworld, began to race, a torrent of questions threatening to overwhelm him. Who was Alexander Mason? Why had he become John Turner? How long had this charade been going on? And the most gut-wrenching question of all, why had he targeted Sonny? The friendship had felt like a lifeline. In a world populated by sycophants, hired guns, and rivals who would slit his throat for a percentage of his territory, John Turner had been different. He was an outsider, a man of science and healing, who had seen the man beneath the mobster. Their bond had been forged months ago, a connection that felt genuine precisely because it existed outside the bloody confines of Sonny's business. Turner had been a confidant, a steady presence who offered counsel without judgment, who had even, on several occasions, patched Sonny up after violent encounters, asking no questions, his loyalty seemingly given without condition. Sonny had trusted him. He had let him into his home, his life, the fragile ecosystem of his family. Carly, his wife, had been wary, her instincts always sharper, more distrustful. But Sonny had dismissed her concerns. He's a good man, Carly, he'd told her. He's not part of this world. The irony of that statement now tasted like ash in his mouth. Turner, no, Mason, wasn't just part of that world, he was a predator who had been invited inside the gates. Memories, once cherished, now twisted into something sinister and grotesque. The quiet conversations at the Metro Court bar, where Sonny had spoken of his fears for his children, his complicated relationship with Michael, his enduring, tortured love for Carly, all of it had been fodder for this imposter. The times Turner had offered medical advice for Mike, Sonny's ailing father, his kindness and patience, was it all a calculated performance? A way to embed himself deeper, to become indispensable? The foundation of their entire relationship was not built on mutual respect, but on a meticulously constructed lie. A cold, murderous fury began to thaw the initial shock freezing Sonny's veins. This was not just a betrayal, it was a violation of the highest order. It was a psychological invasion, a theft of intimacy and trust. In his line of work, Sonny expected betrayal from rivals, from greedy underlings. But this came from a place he had believed was sacred, a sanctuary from the war. Mason hadn't just deceived Sonny the mobster, he had deceived Sonny the man, the husband, the father. He took a step closer to the gurney, his posture shifting from one of concerned friend to that of an interrogator. The air crackled with a new, dangerous energy. "Start talking," Sonny commanded, his voice dropping into the low, controlled register that his enemies feared. "Who are you? Who sent you?" Mason closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from some deep, internal reserve. When he opened them, the mask of John Turner was completely gone. In its place was the weary, hardened resolve of Alexander Mason. "It's complicated, Sonny." "Uncomplicated," Sonny snarled, his patience, always a finite resource, now completely evaporated. "It was never personal," Mason began, his voice weak but deliberate. At first. At first?" Sonny's laugh was a short, harsh bark. "You think that makes it better? That this was just business? You sat at my table. You drank my whiskey. You knew about my father." The sentence trailed off, the betrayal too profound to articulate fully. "I know," Mason whispered, genuine regret flashing in his eyes before being shuddered away. "But it was a job. I was hired to get close to you. To gather information. To find a weakness." The confirmation was another physical blow. A hired operative. A spy. Sonny's mind immediately began running through a roster of his enemies. The Jeromes, with their old-world cunning? Cyrus Renaud, festering in his prison cell but still pulling strings from the shadows? Someone new, someone he hadn't yet anticipated? The list was depressingly long. "Who?" Sonny pressed, his fist clenching at his side. "Who owns you?" Mason shook his head, a faint, bitter smile touching his lips. "You think it's that simple? That I just give you a name and this all goes away? The people I work for, they don't take kindly to failure. Or to loose ends." The threat was implicit, both to Mason himself and to Sonny. This was bigger than a simple rivalry. The fact that Mason feared his employers more than he feared enraged Sonny Corinthos in that moment was telling. Deeply telling. "You should be more afraid of me than you are of them right now," Sonny said, his voice dangerously soft. He leaned in, his face inches from Mason's. "You came into my life. You lied to me. You used my family. You think your employers are the real threat? You have no idea what I'm going to do to you for that." For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear crossed Mason's face. He knew Sonny's reputation. He knew the stories of what happened to those who crossed him. He had, after all, been studying his target for a very long time. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Mason said, his voice barely a whisper. "The plan was observation. Intel. But then what?" Sonny demanded, his gaze boring into Mason's. "But then I got to know you," Mason admitted, the words seeming to cost him. "The real you. Not the monster my employers described. I saw you with your family. I saw you with your father. The loyalty you inspire in people like Jason. It wasn't what I was led to believe." Sonny recoiled as if struck. This was somehow worse. This confession of a changing perspective, this hint of a genuine connection formed within the lie, made the betrayal even more complex and agonizing. It would have been cleaner, simpler, if Mason were a pure sociopath. But this admission suggested a man trapped by his own deception, a man who had perhaps started to care for his mark. It was a pathetic, twisted shred of humanity that only served to make the entire situation more sickening. "Don't," Sonny cut him off, his voice trembling with a rage so pure it was almost paralyzing. "Don't you dare try to tell me you developed a conscience. It's a little too late for that. You don't get to play the conflicted friend now. The only thing I want to hear from you is a name. Who sent you?" The standoff was broken by the brisk approach of a nurse. "Mr. Corinthos, Dr. Turner needs to go for his MRI now. You can wait outside." Sonny didn't move. His eyes remained locked on Mason's, a silent promise of vengeance passing between them. The nurse, sensing the palpable tension, hesitated. "Sir," she said, her voice firmer. With a final, searing look that promised this was far from over, Sonny took a step back. He watched as the orderly began to push the gurney down the hall, the wheels squeaking a rhythmic tattoo that sounded like a countdown to war. Mason, Alexander Mason, turned his head away, closing his eyes either from exhaustion or an inability to bear the weight of Sonny's gaze any longer. As the doors to the imaging suite swung shut, Sonny was left alone in the corridor. The world had not just shifted, it had shattered. The walls of the hospital seemed to press in on him, the sterile whiteness suddenly feeling like a prison. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with a stiff, mechanical precision. He typed a single text message, sent to the one person in the world whose loyalty was absolute, whose partnership was the bedrock of his life and his organization. To Jason Morgan, he wrote, "It's not Turner. It's a lie. Meet me at the warehouse. Now." The drive from General Hospital to the waterfront warehouse was a blur of streetlights and swirling, toxic thoughts. Sonny's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind a chaotic storm of rage, humiliation, and a profound, aching sense of loss. He had mourned John Turner in the aftermath of the accident. He had felt a genuine, piercing fear that he would lose his friend. Now, he was mourning again, but this time, he was mourning a ghost, a fiction. The friendship had never existed. It was a beautiful, intricate piece of art that he had cherished, only to discover it was a forgery. He replayed every interaction, every moment of camaraderie, every time he had let his guard down. The time Turner had talked him through a panic attack. The advice he'd given about dealing with Mike's deteriorating condition. The way he had stood by Sonny during the fallout with Cyrus Renault. It was all a script, expertly performed. Mason had not just been gathering intelligence, he had been building a profile, learning what made Sonny tick, what he loved, what he feared. He had been mapping the vulnerabilities in Sonny's armor, not to protect him, but to pinpoint exactly where to strike. By the time Sonny pulled up to the warehouse, a cold, calculating calm had begun to settle over the initial inferno of his anger. This was no longer about emotion, it was about survival. It was about business. Jason was already there, leaning against his motorcycle, his posture radiating a quiet, ready intensity. He took one look at Sonny's face, the ashen pallor, the tightly controlled fury in his eyes, and knew something catastrophic had happened. "Sonny?" Jason's voice was steady, an anchor in the sudden, violent sea of Sonny's reality. "John Turner," Sonny said, the name tasting like poison. "He's not who he says he is. His name is Alexander Mason. He was planted. A spy." Jason absorbed the information without a flicker of surprise. His mind, logical and strategic, immediately began processing the tactical implications. Who is he working for? He wouldn't say. Said his employers don't take kindly to failure. He's scared of them, Jason. More scared of them than he is of me. Sonny paced the concrete floor, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. He's been in my home. He knows everything about my family, my routines, my weaknesses. This isn't a grab for territory. This is a long game play. This is about destruction from the inside out. Jason's jaw tightened. What do you want to do? First, we contain this. No one can know what we've discovered. Not yet. As far as anyone is concerned, Dr. John Turner is recovering from a car accident. We need to let Mason think he's bought himself some time, that his little confession has left me reeling. We play along. Sonny stopped pacing and turned to Jason, his eyes gleaming with a dark, predatory light. We use his own game against him. He thinks he's the hunter who got too close to his prey. We're going to show him he's wrong. The plan began to form in the shadowy gloom of the warehouse. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. They had to maintain the illusion of normality while secretly turning Port Charles into a trap. Jason would mobilize his most trusted men to begin a deep, covert investigation into the name Alexander Mason. They would scour every database, call in every favor, and lean on every informant from here to Europe. They needed to find out who he was, who he worked for, and what their endgame was. Simultaneously, they would begin a campaign of strategic disinformation. Sonny would continue to visit Mason in the hospital, playing the part of the concerned, grieving friend. But his conversations would now be laced with purpose. He would feed Mason false information, hints about a new shipment, a vulnerable business deal, a fissure in his alliance with Jason. They would dangle bait, carefully constructed lies designed to draw out Mason's handlers and reveal their intentions. "We need to find out what they want," Sonny murmured, more to himself than to Jason. "Is it the organization? Is it to hand me over to the feds? Or is it something more personal?" The thought sent a fresh chill down his spine. If this was personal, then his family was in the crosshairs. Carly, Michael, Willow, Donna, little Avery. His father, Mike. The very thought made the cold fury inside him burn white-hot again. "We'll put extra security on the family," Jason said, as if reading his mind. "Discreetly. No one gets near them." Sonny nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in. The chessboard had been upended, but he was now resetting the pieces. Alexander Mason had made a critical error. In a moment of perceived vulnerability, he had revealed his hand. He had underestimated the sheer, unrelenting force of Sonny Corinthos's wrath. He had mistaken Sonny's capacity for friendship for a weakness, when in reality, the betrayal of that friendship had unleashed the most dangerous version of the man imaginable. Back at General Hospital, the facade was already beginning to crack under the strain of the truth. As Alexander Mason was wheeled back to his private room, the pain from his injuries was a dull throb compared to the searing agony of his predicament. He had broken the first and most important rule of his profession. He had gotten emotionally involved. The confession had been a moment of catastrophic weakness, born from pain, fear, and the disarming, genuine concern he had seen in Sonny's eyes before he'd spoken. He was a dead man. He knew it. Whether by Sonny's hand or by the cold, efficient operatives his employers would send to tie up this loose end, his life was effectively over. The mission was a failure. He had not only failed to secure the final piece of intelligence they needed, the location of Sonny's encrypted financial ledgers, but he had also exposed his true identity. Lying in the stark hospital bed, he replayed the look on Sonny's face. The shock, the hurt, and finally, the terrifying, glacial calm that had descended. That was the look of a man who had already decided your fate. Mason had studied Sonny Corinthos for over a year. He had read the files, watched the surveillance footage, listened to the wiretaps. He knew about the tempers, the rages, the volcanic eruptions of violence. But he also knew that Sonny was at his most lethal when he was quiet. When he was planning. He had to make contact. He had to warn his handlers that the operation was compromised. But how? He was trapped in this room, undoubtedly under surveillance from both the hospital and, now, very likely, Sonny's people. His phone was gone, lost in the accident. He was isolated, vulnerable. A new fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his self-pity. What about the others? The thought came unbidden, a splash of ice water. His sister, the woman known as Maya, who had played her part so perfectly, weaving herself into the social fabric of Port Charles to support his cover. Was she in danger? Had his failure already condemned her? Their relationship was a professional fiction, a construct of their mission, but over months of working in tandem, a bond had formed. He couldn't let her take the fall for his mistake. The web of deception was vast, and he was just one strand. His mind raced, trying to find an angle, a way to salvage something from the wreckage. Perhaps he could still turn this. If he could get a message to his handlers, they could accelerate the plan. Or perhaps he could cut a deal with Sonny. Offer up his employers in exchange for his and Maya's lives. But would Sonny ever trust a word he said? And would his employers simply allow him to betray them? They had resources, reach. They had eyes everywhere. The door to his room opened, and his heart leaped into his throat. Was it a nurse? Or was it the end? It was Sonny. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. The fury was gone, replaced by a mask of grim concern. It was a masterful performance, and it was more frightening than his earlier rage. John, Sonny said, the name hanging in the air like a taunt. The doctors said the MRI looked good. No internal bleeding. You were lucky. Mason could only stare, his mouth dry. The dissonance was jarring. Sonny was continuing the charade. Why? Yeah, Mason managed to croak out. Lucky. Sonny walked further into the room, his hands in the pockets of his coat. He stopped by the window, looking out at the city lights. You had me worried there for a minute. When you said, well, you know. The pain meds must have really been doing a number on you. It was an offered lifeline, a way to retract the confession and slip back into the comfortable skin of John Turner. Sonny was giving him an out, and Mason knew with chilling certainty that it was a trap. Sonny was testing him, seeing if he would be foolish enough to try and retreat back into the lie. He had a choice. He could take the out, pretend it was the drugs, and try to continue this impossible deception. Or he could stand by his revelation and face the consequences head-on. He looked at Sonny's back, at the set of his shoulders, and he knew the first option was suicide. Sonny was not a man to be played twice. The drugs, they can make you say crazy things, Mason said slowly, choosing his words with the care of a man walking through a minefield. Sonny turned from the window, a faint, humorless smile on his lips. Exactly. Crazy things. He walked over to the bedside and looked down at Mason, his eyes dark and impenetrable. You just focus on getting better, John. We'll have plenty of time to talk when you're out of here. There's a new shipping contract I could use your advice on. Seems a little complicated. I'd value your opinion. And there it was. The bait. A shipping contract. Mason knew it was code for a major operation, a significant movement of either legitimate goods or, more likely, the foundation of Sonny's illegal empire. Sonny was offering him a tantalizing piece of false intelligence, seeing if he would bite, if he would scramble to report this new development to his handlers. The game was indeed still on, but the roles had been violently reversed. The hunter was now the hunted, and the prey was setting the traps. I'll look at anything you need, Sonny, Mason replied, his voice barely steady. Just get me out of this place. Soon, Sonny promised, his tone deceptively gentle. He patted Mason's arm, a gesture that once would have felt like camaraderie but now felt like a brand. You get some rest. As Sonny turned and left the room, the silence he left behind was more oppressive than before. Alexander Mason was alone again, but now he was trapped in a gilded cage of his own making, a pawn in a game that was rapidly spinning out of his control. The walls of the hospital room were no longer just a place of healing, they were the antechamber to his own personal hell, and the devil himself had just laid out the terms of his damnation. The revelation of Turner's true identity was not merely a spoiler, it was a tectonic event that would send shockwaves through every life in Port Charles. The fallout would be immense and unpredictable. Alliances would be tested, relationships would fracture, and the very concept of trust would become a luxury no one could afford. In the high-stakes world of power, money, and survival, a single truth, once exposed, could be more destructive than 1,000 lies. And the truth about Dr. John Turner was now out, a deadly virus unleashed, and there was no telling who it would destroy next. Sonny Corinthos had been restless for days, pacing his penthouse at odd hours, replaying every interaction he'd had with Turner since the man first appeared in Port Charles. At first, Sonny chalked it up to stress, Carly leaving, Jason's distance, the chaos at Pikeman, but there was something about Turner that didn't sit right. He felt watched. He felt tested. He felt targeted. And Sonny Corinthos didn't ignore that kind of feeling. Not anymore. Early one morning, long before the sun crept over the skyline, Sonny stood by the window with a cup of coffee he had no intention of drinking. Dante had texted him the night before, telling him he had something he needed to discuss face-to-face. Dante never sent messages like that without good reason. So Sonny waited, palms pressed against the glass, his reflection staring back at him, hardened and suspicious. When Dante finally arrived, he didn't bother with small talk. He shut the door behind him and said, "Dad, we've got a problem. And it's about Turner." Sonny's jaw tightened. "I knew it," he muttered. I knew something about that guy was off. What did you find? Dante hesitated, which irritated Sonny more. Don't hold back. If I'm right about him, I need to know now. Dante exhaled slowly. We got a hit on his prints. Turner isn't who he says he is. His real name is— Sonny cut him off sharply. Don't tell me he's another undercover federal. Dante shook his head. No. Worse. He's connected to someone we thought was dead. Sonny felt a chill crawl up his spine. He turned fully toward Dante. Say the name. Dante swallowed. Jonas Cargill. Sonny felt the name like a punch to the chest. That son of a— Cargill had a kid? No. No, Cargill died years ago. I watched the explosion myself. Dante nodded. He did die. But Turner, real name Elias Cargill, has been off the grid ever since. And Dad, he blames you for his father's death. Sonny slammed his hand against the back of the sofa. I didn't have a choice. Jonas came after my family. He knew the rules. He knew what crossing me meant. Dante said quietly, yeah, well, his son doesn't see it that way. Sonny ran his hands over his face. So Turner, Elias, what? He's been living in Port Charles pretending to be some nobody just to get close to me? Dante answered, we think he's waiting for the right moment. He's been gathering information, talking to people who don't even realize how much they're telling him. Sonny grimaced. He's good. Too good. I should have seen it. Dante stepped closer. Dad, we've got to handle this before he makes a move. Sonny's voice dropped. I'll handle him. Later that afternoon, Sonny walked into his office at Pozzolo's with a calmness that didn't match the storm brewing inside him. He'd summoned Turner under the pretense of discussing business. Turner walked in with that same easy confidence, the same polite smile he always wore. Sonny watched him closely, noting every twitch, every glance. You wanted to see me, Mr. Corinthos? Turner asked casually. Sonny rested his hands on the desk. Yeah. Have a seat. Turner obeyed, folding his hands in his lap. Sonny tilted his head slightly. You've been useful. Observant. Quiet. Turner smiled faintly. I do my best. Sonny leaned in. Yeah, you do. That's the thing. You're too good. Too observant. Too quiet. Turner's smile didn't fade, but something shifted in his eyes, just a flicker, subtle but unmistakable. Sonny stood up slowly. You know, in my line of work, loyalty means everything. But you already know that, don't you, Elias? Turner stiffened, the mask cracking. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but the denial lacked conviction. Sonny's voice dropped. Elias Cargill. Son of Jonas Cargill. The man who tried to take out my family. The man who blew himself to hell because he underestimated me. Turner's jaw clenched. He didn't blow himself up. You killed him. Sonny replied firmly, he made a choice. And you've made yours. Turner stood abruptly, knocking the chair backward. You destroyed everything, he yelled. He wasn't just some name on a list. He was my father. He warned me about men like you, men who pretend to have honor but take whatever they want. You think you know what really happened? You don't. Sonny remained calm, too calm. I know he came after what was mine. I know he forced my hand. Turner seethed. You think that excuses it? You think that makes you righteous? Sonny stepped around the desk, inching closer. I don't care about righteous. I care about survival. And you've just revealed exactly why you're here. Turner's breathing grew uneven. I'm here to finish what he started, he whispered. I'm here to take everything from you. Before Turner could reach for anything, weapon or otherwise, Jason barged into the room with Dante behind him. Turner froze, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. Jason's voice was cold. "Don't move." Turner looked between the three men, then lowered his hands slowly. "So this is how it ends," he muttered. Sonny shook his head. "No. This is how your plan ends. Mine isn't over." Turner let out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won? You think exposing me stops anything? I've already put things in motion you don't even know about." Sonny stepped closer, anger simmering beneath the surface. "What did you do?" Turner smirked. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Dante cuffed him, reading him his rights, but Turner continued to speak, unfazed. "You should be afraid, Sonny. My father taught me everything he knew. And he made sure that if anything ever happened to him, you'd pay for it one day. That day is today." Sonny narrowed his eyes. "You're lying." Turner looked back at him, a chilling calmness returning. "Am I?" Later that evening, after Turner was taken into custody, Sonny sat alone in his office. Jason re-entered quietly. "You okay?" he asked. Sonny didn't look up. "No." "Something," he said, "something wasn't right." Jason nodded. "He might just be bluffing." Sonny shook his head. "No. He believes it. Whatever Jonas left behind, Elias thinks it's still out there. Something aimed at me." Jason leaned forward. "Then we find it before he or anyone else does." Sonny exhaled deeply. "Yeah. We have to." Hours later, Dante returned with bad news. Turner had been transported for interrogation, but during the transfer, he escaped. Sonny stood abruptly. "You're telling me Elias Cargill is out there somewhere, and we don't know what he's planning?" Dante answered grimly, "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Sonny slammed his fist into the desk. "This isn't over." Dante agreed. "No. It's just beginning." Jason straightened. "We need to tighten security. Double everyone's surveillance. No one gets close without us knowing." Sonny nodded but remained uneasy. Meanwhile, Turner, Elias, was already in the shadows, slipping into an unmarked car as a mysterious figure handed him a folder. "He knows," Turner said, breathless and angry. The figure answered, "Good. Then everything is working as planned." Turner opened the folder, revealing photos, maps, and coded notes. "Sonny Corinthos thinks he understands what my father wanted. He doesn't." The figure replied, "Just stick to the timeline." Turner smirked. "Oh, I will." Sonny won't see what's coming until it's too late. Back at the penthouse, Sonny couldn't shake the dread twisting in his gut. Carly called to check on him, but he kept his voice calm, not wanting to worry her. After he hung up, he poured himself a drink and stared out the window again. "Jonas Cargill," he muttered. "You still haunting me from the grave." Jason entered quietly. "You're thinking."